Welcome to this episode of Temple Beth Am's Are You Coming Back? Personal, candid conversations with Jewish thought leaders across the country on the future of Jewish practice, hosted by Rabbi Cantor Hilary Chorny.
If you don't know Carrie Bornstein, you've probably heard of the place where she serves as executive director, Mayyim Hayyim, Living Waters Community Mikveh and Education Center near Newton, Massachusetts. Or maybe you've heard her on a panel representing the Rising Tide Open Waters Mikveh Network. Maybe you've encountered her voice as a moderator of the Facebook group Mental Health in the Jewish Community. Or maybe you read her smart, candid, heartfelt piece, Kids' Mental Health Can't Be an Afterthought. Carrie's such a bright light in the Jewish professional world, and I couldn't wait to sit down with her and hear more about the past, current, and future chapters of her Jewish practice and life with family in quarantine. I enjoyed every minute of our conversation on our way to the ultimate question, are you coming back? I'm really excited to welcome into conversation today Carrie Bornstein, who is the Executive Director of Mayyim Hayyim, Living Waters Community Mikveh and Education Center. And she lives in Sharon, Massachusetts. But we might as well be anywhere because we're here having this conversation from respective home offices. And I want to thank you so much, Carrie, for joining me in conversation today.
Totally a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
As you know, we're having conversations with Jewish thought leaders and organizational leaders across the country about the kinds of things that we wish we could ask our congregants, but maybe we're not ready just yet as clergy, either ready to ask the question or ready to hear the answer. But I know that you think about the future of Jewish communal life professionally, and I'm interested today, and I thank you in advance for taking a deep dive from a personal lens. But of course, we never take off those professional hats when we're diving into our personal stuff. And so I'll ask you and invite you to bring that into the conversation as well. We're looking to a future world that is going to be recognizable, but also recognizably different than the one before. And in order to kind of go into what you think your Jewish life might look like actively once we're able to re-engage in person much more than we can now, I wonder if you could take me back like a year to 2019, Carrie and family. Kind of give me a picture of what Shabbat morning or holidays or spiritual gathering looked like at that time. Give me a sense of the sights and the sounds that characterized what life looked like before this all began.
Yeah, so it's hard to remember what life was like before this all began. In terms of thinking about our Shabbat life in particular, it's really ranged. It's been, we've ranged the gamut from, really engaged, involved Jewish life and on a super active basis. I mean, this is going back now farther than 2019, more like pre-kid time. And when our oldest was, a year or 2 years old. And that was probably the height of our Jewish engagement when things were at their best. And sometimes parenting and organized Jewish life, particularly on Shabbat, don't necessarily go together so easily. So that's just a challenge that we've felt our whole parenting career just about. But I would say, 2019 us was a mix of going to shul sometimes at an actual structure of a shul, and sometimes going to shul on our couch and, sitting at home on Shabbat morning and really relaxing and taking it easy, and pretty split, on eating at home, meals with friends, our place when we could get our act together to do it, other people's places when that invitation would come, sort of ongoing engagements, but a little mix of things as well.
Was synagogue life a part of that for you, even beyond like Shabbat or holidays? Was that something that you engaged with personally or with your family?
Not as much. There have been times when we have been more involved. We moved to Sharon when our oldest was a year and a half. We had been living in a 1-bedroom condo closer to near Brookline in the Boston area, and we needed to expand. We had this kid like in our bedroom and in the living room, and it was enough already. Mm-hmm. So we started looking around for other places we could live. We desperately wanted to stay in Brookline, and the allure of having a house with a yard and a driveway and laundry in our house, it was just, it was a very strong pull when we started comparing prices, and knowing that we could get that for the same amount as we could get a 2-bedroom apartment somewhere without parking. And, so part of the reason why we came here is because there were so many different shuls. I think there's like 7 or 8 different shuls in this one little suburban town, and multiple within walking distance also. So we felt like this was a place, even though we didn't necessarily feel like any one of them was going to be our home, we felt like we had options, and that felt comfortable. So we came here, and we were part of one shul for a while, and then we went to another shul for a while, and we started an independent minyan on our own at one point, and then I became the executive director of Mayyim Hayyim and had a little bit less time available to me to do things like that. So we've kind of gone around the beaten path a bit. So we've definitely been involved, but it hasn't been, I would say, spiritually fulfilling in the way that it was when we were a part of the Washington Square Minyan in Brookline, and really felt like we were with our people and our community and inspired by what was going on there. And we've actually gone every year since we moved here. We've gone back to Brookline for the Hayyim, to be there for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and just feel like that is where we need to be.
It sounds like, particularly for Shabbat more than the Yamim Noraim, it sounds like you had a lot of options before. Like you chose a home in a community where you could pick different things. Like one Shabbat could be one flavor and another could be at somebody's home or at your home. I think that might be a good pivot point to ask if that shifted, if that feeling of what you could do on Shabbat shifted starting in March and when the pandemic began. Do you feel like you still have options for Shabbat, or did it change radically?
No. Well, I mean, no, but yes. I think the biggest difference, honestly, feels like for me that we're choosing an option that's actually most comfortable for us, which is not to go anywhere, which is so sad, right? Like it's sad to say that and to know that. And at the same time, there's something that's been freeing actually about letting go of the guilt associated with, we haven't been to shul in so long, we really should get there. Like our daughter's bat mitzvah was coming up, and like, how is she ever going to know anything if we're not making this a regular part of our world? And, not just for that sake, for teaching her, but like, we want this to be a regular part of our family life for its own sake. And knowing that even in the best of times, like I alluded to before, there's a lot about synagogue life that as a parent of 3 young children is just really challenging. I suspect it's challenging for everyone. Our children in particular are, it's just not so conducive to shul life. They are like, they have tons of energy. They need to be moving and talking and eating like all the time. And I think we have sort of an aversion to the children's services, taught Shabbat kinds of things, feeling like we just really want the main shul to be a place that welcomes kids for who they are. And it's like, we're maybe a little bit too principled about it, but really don't like the idea of shuttling them off into a separate room where they're like not even necessarily learning so much there anyway. And that's tricky because it hasn't been so conducive. There were times, in the last, I guess, a little less than 2 years ago now, where, we went to shul right after the Pittsburgh attacks. And that was just such a powerful experience for me, especially at a time where we weren't going to shul tons. And we felt like we need to go to shul. We are going to shul that next Shabbat. And just feeling like that was where we were supposed to be. And didn't necessarily, our kids have a lot of struggles with anxiety and various other forms of challenges. And rightly so, it was being talked about from the Bima. And it's like, what's that like when the kids are hearing that and exposed to that? And, it's not just that piece of things, but it's also, to be a Jew is not to be exposed to all of the happy, light topics on a regular basis during sermons. It's a typical, usual thing that there's going to be something deeply troubling that we're talking about from the Bima. And that's an element of things too, that I think just over time has made it difficult for us to engage in synagogue life.
I remember that first Shabbat when people were told not to come to shul. It was about the second or third weekend in March. And people were told to stay home for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I remember talking then about the contrast of the show up to shul for the weekend after Pittsburgh and how we were asking people not to come to shul. But in my mind's eye, I can picture that I was talking to a bat mitzvah and her family. There were actually 2 benot mitzvah in different services in our building that day. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be really hard for families with B'nai Mitzvah in this next realm, like knowing that already. And I know that you think deeply about this because I know Hayyim as an educational center actually engages on a really large scale with families that are dealing with bar bat mitzvah. So I'll give you the freedom to talk about this either as a parent of a bar bat mitzvah age kid or from a professional lens. What does this mean right now?
To be told specifically to not come to shul.
Yeah, to be in an era, well, I guess to dig deeper, to be in an era where whatever your choice was beforehand, coming to shul is not what it was. Mm-hmm. And so now that experiential part of education, that part where you talk about yearning for your kids sitting by your side, even when it's uncomfortable to listen to the content of that sermon and to know it might be a challenge for them, what a critical part that can be of their experience leading up into the adult experience of claiming the adult experience of shul. So what does it mean now that shul is kind of canceled for a lot of people, not for everyone, but a lot of shul experiences are not there?
Yes. And to complicate that further, I think as a Shomer Shabbat family who is not getting onto Zoom for Shabbat, it's complicated even further. There have been times, I mean, the Hayyim is one example, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, where we just don't turn on we just don't use technology on Shabbat. And it was at that point where I was like, I just am. I just am, that's what it's going to be. But on a regular basis, we don't. And so it's really canceled. We don't feel like, it's the right thing for our family to say, we'll log on and, go to this place. And part of me feels a little bit sad about that. Like I wonder what it would be like. I kind of wish that it would be different. There was something really nice about, in Rosh Hashanah being like, where do I want to go to shul? Should I go to Rabbi Mu? Should I go to B'nai Jeshurun? Should I go to, it was kind of fun to get to hop around like that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated on an extra level to feel like, being part of a community that is not going to use technology and also isn't going in person. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There have been, in different forms, but the shuls in town have been doing in-person, socially distanced davening experiences, for Shabbat and for holidays. And we haven't gone. We haven't been a part of it. And part of that, again, is this challenge of kids is it's a 20-minute walk, and to schlep people out of the house, it's like, it's still not easy. And you've got all the anxieties of COVID on top of things, and a kid who's convinced that he's going to die if he leaves the front yard. And, so I think we felt that very deeply in the beginning as well. In particular, like, didn't matter if we were being told to stay home or not. Like, one of our kids in particular, like, was not going anywhere. Did not matter. It took a lot of coaxing over the summer to get him to feel comfortable walking down the street outside. So I guess we haven't been overthinking it too much because everything's upside down. And I think we have a feeling that someday it's going to change and things will open up again, despite the fact that it feels like things are never opening up again. I'm trying to remember that it was sort of like the stage of having a newborn where, I remember just really believing like, that's it. I'm never going to sleep through the night again. Done. Like, not a chance. This is just, okay, this is what we're doing now. And eventually they start sleeping. So I think that's how I'm trying to think about this period of time, and hoping that, I don't know, that there will be a new infusion of energy and creativity when things open up again.
It's really interesting. I'm trying not to put a judgment word on it, but I want to put a positive judgment word on it. If anything, it's really enlivening to hear you talk openly about how there's real mental health at play when it comes to the way that we choose to leave our homes or not these days, when it comes to how you spend your Shabbat or not. I even hear a little bit of that in your expression of, I just am that person now on Yummy Mayyim. I needed that, knowing what you need for yourself. And I know you spend a lot of time listening these days in that mental health awareness, the mental health in the Jewish community Facebook group, of which I enjoy being an engaged listener, reader. What are you hearing in terms of echoes or trends or stories that really stick with you that open up the places in you that need to think about this more deeply these days?
Specifically on the topic of mental health you're asking about?
Yeah, in that community, or in the conversations that have been opened up by your hosting that group. Yeah. What are you hearing from other people about some of the wrestling that they're doing in this time?
Yeah. What's really interesting to me and my vantage point as the admin of that group is there's one question that people have to answer to get into the group. I don't want to just have it be open where anybody can add anybody else, and suddenly you've got people in the group who never wanted to be there in the first place. The question is, why do you want to be part of this group? Like, just answer something. And there are a lot of people who are there for professional reasons and wanting to learn and share what they're doing on this topic. There are a lot of people who are struggling with a lot of very real things. And they share that, in the reasons why they're joining. People struggling with substance abuse, with depression, with OCD, with eating disorders. I mean, the whole gamut, you name it, for themselves, their family members, all kinds of people. And what I'm struck by, not shocked, but I'm struck actually by the fact that the conversation in the group itself has not opened up in such a deep way that I imagine, or that I hope someday it will get there. It's not there. I get it, right? Like, I'm actually part of a similar group for Massachusetts parents with children with mental health needs. And it is like, everyone is just out there with everything. And it's been personally, for our family, it's been such a help and such a support to ask questions about, anybody know about this medication? Or what do you think about that hospital? Or can anybody recommend a therapist that does this because my kid did this again? Can you believe it? Like all of that stuff. And we dealt with a lot of those questions specifically from a Jewish perspective. Our kids have been have been hospitalized, and we're first round of this going in was on Sukkot last year, and so all the questions of what do we do with Yontif, and driving on Sukkot, and kosher food, and just how do we navigate all of this, and that's part of what inspired myself to create this, but that was something that I'm hoping we'll get there, because it's a Jewish community. It's closer to home, and people know each other, and we're all family. And sometimes with our family, we really put things out there, and sometimes we really, really don't. I think we'll get there. I think it's just very real what everyone's dealing with. And I think I guess the point of all of this is that I think it's much more real than our wider public community is really getting or talking about or knowing how deep it really is. But I know firsthand it's there, it's real, and it's happening.
Yeah, and it's slow going to build that kind of sacred space online, but it's a matter of that conversation opening up. The people are there.
Yeah.
Have you found anything in COVID for your own family that became an opportunity to sort of invent in the narrow spaces? Given that you're stuck at home, is there anything that kind of helps with the joy or the health or the togetherness of your family now that you're in COVID zone?
COVID land, yeah. I think in a very slow way, yes. I have to believe yes. It is. I remember thinking about this more at the beginning, maybe spending all this time together will learn how to spend time together and, really just have siblings prancing around and getting along together. And, we're not there yet, I'll say. In some ways, it's certainly worse than when it started. But I do think that it's changing the nature of our family, the dynamic in our family, and what we do on Sundays. And I actually think because there's such an assumption that we're at home and this is just what we're doing, the kids have been a little bit easier to get off of screens, for example, on a Sunday, where Sundays are the days that actually they have the least screens. I mean, aside from Shabbat, we turn it off in the morning and we don't let them turn it on back again until late afternoon and prepping dinner. And they kind of get it. And we're just hanging out together. It's, not so lovely in terms of playing games and all that. But I think that there's a little bit of a homier assumption for how our family works. I also think that, this is maybe a silly little example, but I feel like we've started to develop some, Shabbat meal repertoire. These are the things that we like and that are kind of on repeat from time to time. And we're getting into a little bit of a ritual groove with that end of things. Personally, I'll say that as much as this time is just, I'm ready for it to end months ago. There is something that is nice about working from home and just coming down to the basement to work as opposed to sitting in the car for more than an hour to get to work and kind of going at an easier pace. So I think that has reverberations and the others probably have similar things.
Do you find yourself talking to other people about how they're doing their Shabbat? The people who work with you or people who were a part of your Shabbat circuit before, do you exchange recipe advice or how to survive another Saturday with no screens and oh my gosh, thank goodness the clock's turned back and
not so much, to be honest. I think that's there's a piece of the narrative of all of this that for us has converged together where we are a lot more separated from some of the people that we had been in touch with, where there's a communal aspect that's missing. And especially because, once COVID started, our kids had challenges before COVID started, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them got seriously exacerbated once this all started. And the level of what we were dealing with our kids was much, much worse. And where there was a point, I think, particularly earlier on in the summer, where to some extent it felt so good to go take a walk and run into people. And, I remember the very beginning, we walked out down the street after a couple of weeks of being at home. We were like, oh, you, look, it's a human, it was like very exciting to see a human being that we knew. After things got really hard, there was a time period where I felt like I just can't actually deal with the small talk right now. I felt like there was a shifting in my identity and our family's identity of the things that we were dealing with, and where things just felt really different. And I think it felt a little bit too liminal at that point, where we hadn't yet come out on the other side. I think that's subsided as we've been talking and sharing more about what's been going on, and as things have opened up again and kids are getting back into school, and that's been huge for us. So there's an identity piece that I think has shifted during this time, but it hasn't been as connected as maybe I imagine it is for other people. I don't know.
Yeah, part of what I hear you saying, especially in mentioning that Facebook group with the Massachusetts parents who are dealing with mental health issues with their children, is that there are a lot of places where there are gaps in the Jewish community dealing with how to be supportive, either of another family who is also dealing with mental health issues in their family, or how just to be with community and have big talk, or not small talk, but like not just medium talk, but like the big talk in communities. And that part of your efforts have been trying to create that, but even that's not quite coming to fruition yet. And so maybe community is just shaped a little bit differently in this time, because the stuff that you need isn't necessarily emanating out of the Jewish community. I really wrestle with that, because both on a philosophical level and on an organizational level, I want the Jewish world to contain within it everything that I might need, particularly the big stuff, right? Particularly the big stuff. And the idea that I can't find that space already existing at my shul, which I might rely on as my community, or worse, like anywhere in the Jewish world. That's something I really wrestle with. I don't want to say that people should ever have to, quote unquote, go outside the Jewish world to get the things that they need. But I don't know how privileged or presumptuous that idea is, because maybe it's possible. Like I'm moved by what you said. There's some things you can't talk about with family in the same way that you can talk about elsewhere. So I kind of wanted to dig into that idea with you, especially since you run Mayyim, which tries to be a container, to use Mikveh word for these things. Do you think that the Jewish community is capable of holding all this stuff? Or maybe is there just some stuff that the Jewish community is not able to contain as fully within it as we need, especially on the big talk?
Yeah. Oh, aspirationally, completely, 100%. Like I actually have no doubt that with any of these topics that are the big ones, that we can get there. And I don't, in some places it feels like a really far reach, maybe from where we are now, but I also see a lot of really good work happening in the Jewish community in pockets all over the place. I think that there's a lot going on a very direct service, small, I don't mean small, like not important, but on maybe micro communities kind of ways that have not broken into the mainstream just yet. And, but I absolutely believe that we can and will get there. And I'm particularly inspired by our work at Mayyim Hayyim, opening up the ritual of Mikveh. Like my God, if we can take this ritual that's like probably has the most barriers to participation as any ritual in the Jewish community, like you are going to some strange building and taking off your clothes and getting in the water, and there might be a stranger in the room with you. Like, there are so many reasons to not feel comfortable going in and doing that. And we've managed to open this up and help people understand that actually it can be a beautiful, meaningful, spiritual, personal experience and give you, no matter who you are, exactly what you need in that moment. And so I'm inspired by that as a baseline, knowing that that we've done such important work in that arena. Like, come on, we can do this for alcoholism or suicide or, you know, all those light topics, right? Like all of the heavy, really painful, challenging things. Like, I don't know, we can do this. Like we're smart people. we can put our heads together and pull some funding together and make real change. So yeah, we're not there yet. We have a long way to go. And I also think, like, again, inspired by our work at Mayyim Hayyim, there's a lot that I think if we come, you know, very much from a values perspective at Mayyim Hayyim. We've got 7 principles that really guide just about everything that we do. And whenever there's a question, whenever there's a conflict, we always go to our values and say, okay, well, we care about, you know, Klal Yisrael, and so therefore we're going to this. We care about, you know, the community of Israel. We're going to do this. Or Hidur Mitzvah, like Jewish life should be beautiful. So, okay, we're gonna reprint the thing that came out messy because we believe in Hidur Mitzvah, right? So, you know, I think that the values are there in our community, and we need to trust ourselves and come back to our values to be able to make decisions. And I think there are a lot of situations that are actually much clearer for how to handle in a way that will feel good and validating and welcoming to people than we currently really have set up for ourselves. But yeah, I think we're going to get there.
And in addition to your current role being an executive director, you also dropped that you helped to found an independent Minyan, right? That you're one of the founders of Minyan. So you know what it's like to create Jewish community from desire, but also from scratch. And looking at some of these gaps, thinking of COVID as a palate cleansing time for communities to step back and see what it is they're doing right and what it is they're not doing. What are some of your wishes? What do you wish that synagogue life might do a little bit better? They might be the same as what you've mentioned already, but I'm curious if there's more there.
I love the idea of a palate cleanser. Such a positive spin on what we're all going through. And yeah, I mean, it is an opportunity to take a step back and breathe. You know, for synagogues in particular, I hope that this time will allow for an openness to possibilities and a really deep listening to our community. And that's, by the way, our congregants and people who are not our congregants, but maybe might be in the future. And why aren't they coming? Maybe there's a reason for that we can, if we can really listen and engage, maybe we'll uncover that. I hope that we start, I think that all serves for our clergy too. Clergy are, I'm just in awe of the role that clergy play in our communities at all times. But my God, at this time, like none of the clergy, I mean, not that I'm clergy, but, in my work at Mayyim Hayyim, like none of us were trained for any of this. We're making it up as we go along, and we're doing the best that we can and using our judgment and our people to help us through. But I hope that we can all approach the future with a sense of really listening to our stakeholders, current and future, whoever they may be, to really try to create something that is as welcoming as possible. And a lot of that has to do with hearing the hard things, hearing some of the reasons why people have been kept away, why people don't feel comfortable, don't feel welcome, and like kind of being grateful for that data to say, wow, now we actually have the information that we can do something about it. That's great. So much better that we know that than to not know it to begin with. So I think that's a high level hope that I have.
Do you think there are things that synagogues could be doing, roles that synagogues could be playing right now that they're not? Things that, I appreciate the praise of clergy. That's great. but in this time of tremendous unease, is there something that synagogue clergy could be doing better?
I'll tell you one thing that my current synagogue is in the process of doing that just feels so great. It's one of these things that's such a small thing, but it's such a big thing. I got an email saying, we know that you're a parent of young children, and this must be a tough time for the situation that you're in. And we have congregants who are empty nesters in our community who are looking to do something and looking for connection, and they're interested in making a meal for your family if you'd like that. We're like, whoa, that's great. Yes, sign me up. I will take dinner home cooked by somebody other than, us. And it also said, if you're interested in developing a relationship in a quasi grandparenting kind of role for your kids, they'd love that too. Just let us know. Like, some of that communal matchmaking just felt brilliant to me. It seems like such a no-brainer. It's something that clergy can organize to help support so many different people. So I loved that. Looking forward to getting my meal. I'm sure it will be delicious. And even if it's not, I didn't have to cook it, and I'll have to, clean up the pots and pans. So it'll be great.
That'd be a great tagline for a mediocre restaurant. Like, it's not delicious, but at least you didn't have to cook it. Right.
Exactly.
And you're right about that kind of matchmaking, acknowledging different people's needs, because I imagine that there are other people who are combating a tremendous sense of boredom, a sense of uselessness, and to be able to contribute to community too. That kind of matchmaking matters.
Yes. And I love, again, like a lot of my work is with clergy. And so I resonate, my heart goes out to the clergy, but it also is, seems like such a good use of leadership, because it's helping to create a system that does not all rise and fall on the shoulders of one person. We at Mayyim Hayyim, our whole system is set up on volunteers, and it's very intentional that we don't have one staff person who runs the mikveh for lots of reasons. But it helps really engage the community. And one of the best results of that model is that we've trained, I think, more than 200 volunteer mikveh guides at this point. And all of those people have families and friends and connections, and it helps strengthen the community as a whole. And so great that all of these people are going to make meals and get meals, but it really is strengthening the community in a way that the rabbi or the cantor can sort of hold the strings up to make it all happen without cooking 40 meals themselves.
I don't think
that wouldn't be good to use. Yeah,
I think people would say about my food, it was okay, but at least I didn't have to cook it.
Great, you can cook me a meal anytime.
I definitely would be on the recipient end of that matchmaking endeavor. What are you seeing in terms of? Well, backing up a step, Mayyim Hayyim, it's reopened, and I know it wasn't open for this entire COVID window. I have my ear to the door on lots of the, should we mikveh, should we not mikveh conversations throughout this era. I'm curious if you heard about any sense of ritual invention that happened for people who didn't have their Hayyim, they didn't have their mikveh, they couldn't get there. Have you heard any stories that have really stuck with you about what people are doing or what they were craving, or that first dip back that are just, I don't know, shining examples to you of meaning making at this time?
I do. My youngest child just came home from school, and so I'm going to just cut in for a second to say I'm sorry for background noise. You can cut this part out, but
no problem. It's real life.
Jonah, cool. It is. Yeah, it's real life. We've got a whole. Yeah, everybody's here. Oh, Jonah, that's awesome. Yeah, I am recording something right now. So can you ask Appa for help? Cool, thanks. Okay, the dog's here. Everybody's here. It's very exciting.
My gosh, bringing the chickens. It's a whole
chickens are staying outside. So
very good. Yeah, very good.
Smart. Yeah. I do. So
on Friday,
let me pause until I don't want to start talking and make the editing process too hard.
It's all good.
It's okay. All right. So, hey, Jonah, can you try to whisper? Okay. So, there's been a lot of creativity that's come out of this time in particular. And one of the things that I'm actually most excited about, just, personally, is that we were forced into this place of mikveh not exactly being something that you can transfer so easily to Zoom. As the whole world was saying, like, how do we, translate this to Zoom? Like, you just really can't with a mikveh. So that forced a lot of creativity. We explored a lot and connected with a lot of people and scholars who were asking the same questions and doing research and looking at our texts to say, like, well, how does this work and what is the leeway? And, I would have been the first person to say, before all this, like, you can't have, an immersion in a mikveh in a bathtub or a shower. Like that is not how it works. And here's why. And I could have backed up, the text about how a mikveh is supposed to be built that's just not, we just can't do that. And actually, thank God for people who do this as their life's work. Once we started looking deeper into things, we discovered that actually there's a category for this time of life, and there we can look at how the flow of the water goes through the pipes and how big is the bathtub, and finding all of these places where actually in times of great need, such as something like this, it might actually be possible to have a kosher immersion in a bathtub or in a shower. And that was just fast. Like I always love when something gets turned on its head in my mind, when I realized that I had been looking at something from one perspective the whole way through. And now all of a sudden, like, whoa, I didn't see that. So that was really exciting to see and to learn. And so we shared a lot of that out with our community. We taught, we also did some work sharing, teaching online, did some webinars around creating a ritual hand washing experience at home, called it Mikveh to Go. How do you do something like this if you want to go to a lake or something like that? There was one woman who told us about an experience that she had when she had just stopped going to the mikveh when COVID started. Was just like, I can't, kind of how I was on Rosh Hashanah when I was like, I just can't not go to shul and do anything. She's like, I just can't go to the mikveh. And then after we led some of these teachings, she decided to bring a friend with her to a lake. And she, this isn't one of the people who's like, I love water and the natural, like she's like, get me in, get me out. And this was not her thing. And she talked about just how incredibly meaningful and empowering it was, and how she came out of the water and two texts, one from her kid who was like, everything is terrible and why aren't you here? Another one from her husband saying, you're amazing, by the way. And so that's how life is right now. It's amazing and it's terrible and it's all wrapped up in one. And, so I think the the creativity that a lot of this has forced is it's kind of like similar to what I'm imagining as it relates to synagogues as well.
Yeah, what it makes me think is how much we turn to sources external to ourselves to get a sense of what is authentic and right, particularly for people who rely on the idea of a halachic system, that there's a set of rabbinic voices that can guide our lives. You know, who's going to come and tell us that we are or are not supposed to turn that screen on Rosh Hashanah? Who's going to come and tell us not to stand beneath a running shower at a certain temperature because we read Chaviva's Ner David's article and we thought that it was compelling, and read them all. And who's to say that those of us who hold some of these things really precious are willing to give them up, knowing that there's a fear there that if we give permission to ourselves or to other people to do otherwise, that there's something precious lost, even if it's our own identity in it. I am a person who doesn't watch screens on these holidays. Now there's an asterisk on that. And I remember conversations, not fearful, it's the wrong word, but definitely with a questioning concern of, if we give people permission, if they know, even though we know that it's a pandemic stamp of approval, if we give them permission to make these ritual innovations and create a container of sanctity in their bathroom at home, will they come back? Coming to the core question of this conversation, right? Will they come back? So if I make that exception for myself, I don't know, for me, my answer to this, and I'd love to know your answer to this. My answer to this is it comes down to my accepting what a tremendously traumatic time it is right now. Right? When people say this is sha'at hak, that this is like an hour of unlike anything else, right? True crisis. Yeah. Well, that requires me accepting that this is an hour of true crisis to buy into the fact that it's okay to take a mikveh dip in my shower. And so I wrestle with that. And I wonder, for you, do you worry about the identity either on a personal level or communally when you think about Mayyim Hayyim, that there will be what not to come back to?
Yeah, we talked about this. Is it going to undermine our work if we share this? And I was never concerned about that, to be honest. I felt like, if people are not going to come back because of that, we've got bigger issues to figure out. And we're not doing something right if that's the case. So let's keep innovating and let's keep looking at what, if we believe that we offer something important and meaningful, then let's keep working on it. Let's keep working on, is that really true? Is it really compelling and meaningful? How are we communicating it to people? Like, what are the reasons why people might not be coming back? And I don't think we really know yet, to be honest. I mean, we're open now on such a limited basis because of COVID and everything that goes along with it, that I don't think we really know just yet. Are we, when this is over, will we see the numbers that we saw before? I always felt like, you know what, actually, after this, people are going to get it a lot more about what is a mikveh and like why it might be needed. So, I think all the more so if we're going to say, you want to do this in your shower? Do this in your shower. Then maybe you want to come see what it's like in a building. And so I think it just, we need to, I certainly don't want to withhold an option for someone because I think it's not in their best interest. And I think that it's not the right choice for them. Like, who am I? They need to make that decision for themselves. So I'm not worried about it. If anything, I think, this goes back to our ancient texts of being separated from the community, right? Going outside of the camp and then needing to wash in water before you returned. I think, when this first started, I think we all imagined like, okay, this is going to be a couple weeks, a month, something. And then poof, it's going to be over. We're going to have a ritual of re-entry to the community, and won't it be great to put this all behind us? And someday, hopefully we'll still get there, but it's not going to be that poof moment. So if anything, I think if we keep listening to our community and connecting with them and going with the flow that exists, it's going to mean that we have something relevant for people to come back to.
It's really resonating with me to talk about the return to ritual and the return to community not happening in a poof. Because we're sitting here having a conversation about, 56 hours after polls closed in our country. And I think that even those people who accept that we've never had a clear answer by the end of election night, even that category of people, and I like to think I fall in that category of people, there's a real "are we there yet" feeling. And I'm missing the catharsis of a check mark, of a stamp, of a this is it, and a cutting of a ribbon to come back. Instead, it's a trickle. And I think you're right that is what the return to Jewish communal life is going to be like, as a trickle. So I don't know, what are the first things that you're not doing now that you're looking forward to coming back to, if at all?
I do hope that by Purim we're able to open up. I mean, Purim is like my shining moment. I take Purim costumes very seriously. So that was, we felt that last year as one of the last things we were probably going to do for a while. And so that felt, we were feeling it in that moment, certainly at that point. So that I'm looking forward to a return of Purim. I realized the other day when I was on Trua's Tikkun Leil election that they did on election night, after, I don't remember whose session it was, but there was something that was just so beautiful, and a musical piece. And I realized, like, wow, this would be the moment where everyone would just be in applause together, like clapping loudly. And I realized how long it's been since I've heard applause. And that was wild to me. I was like, I think it's been, I don't know, like we're approaching a year since I've been in a room with many people and heard them all clap together, and just that sense of energy. So I think there's an element of that I'm really looking forward to, feeling the presence of other people in a space. I think that's why so many people get so sucked into Facebook and other things like that, is like, it is community. There's, a lot of reasons why it's like not ideal community. And it's a way of connecting. And so, there is a communal element that I'm, very much looking forward to getting back to.
The sound of applause is a really good marker for that. Yeah, I missed it. Do you already know what the Purim costumes are? Is this already planned in November?
Well, I mean, usually, yes. Usually I have a good inkling of, like, if it's August and I don't really know, then I start getting nervous. But I'm holding off now. Like, is this going to be a Zoom display? It's like, is this a computer display? Is this in person? So I need to know the parameters first, I think, before I work too hard on that.
I too am looking forward to seeing what Purim might bring this year, and also to those strange feeling that we kind of have approached Purim from a pandemic perspective before. At least we did on the West Coast. It was already a bit modified. What is that going to mean to be able to actually learn from this experience? It does feel that we're inventing everything as we're going along, as you said. But can you imagine lapping ourselves on a year of this and actually having a model for a Pesach Seder?
How'd we do it last time? Yeah.
Right. I've missed that feeling. How did we do that?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, that's true. That will be nice. I had a mentor of mine, Leslie Littman, who was a mentor of mine in my first job out of college, and I was the youth director at Temple Israel in Boston, and she said to me, if you can stay in a job for 3 years that's when you really start seeing the payoff of your work. Because the first time around, you're just getting to know everything. And, it's like the first time you've done everything. And then the second time there's a pattern. And then the third year is when you can really do something. And please God, like there's no way we're going to be in this for 3 years. Right. But I do think that there's something to draw on from that, which is to say, I think that there are a lot of things that many of us would hope will continue even after this is over. And, I think year 2, certainly, even more so year 3, there will be things that we'll be able to really learn from and take forward. I think a lot of what we have been able to do on Zoom electronically, like there's no doubt that there are people who would not otherwise physically walk into a building and are able to participate in things now. So great. Like, let's continue that. That's really exciting. And I think that there will be a lot of things like that.
That's a great point. It is definitely giving equity of access to a lot of people, at least opening doors to the idea that people might, quote unquote, walk into your organization, even though they're not walking in. It lowers the barrier. I also think that up until this time, kind of like thinking about those first 3 years where you're in a place, that there's a honeymoon there, and that I feel there's a lot of forgiveness present at every program and every service. Everyone says, well, it wasn't perfect, but at least I didn't have to cook it or whatever, that the version of that, right? It wasn't perfect, but they're all flying by the seat of their pants. They're all, doing this as best as they possibly can. So there's a great generosity of spirit there. I do worry about when that, wanes a little bit. And that's often my hope, that people who are participants in the Jewish community can hold on to that feeling while still moving into the zone of this isn't brand new.
I think that's totally great. Yes, I really agree with that. That resonates.
You've been doing some writing in this time.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you for a moment what it feels like to write about your experiences, particularly your experiences as a surrogate, and if what it's like to be a writer in this time, and if this time is impacting you in the way that you're reflective.
Yeah, I mean, there's a total conundrum of it all when it feels like there's just so much content and so much new and so much to comment on, and the capacity for doing so is like so much lower. It feels more settled now, but certainly in the spring and the summer when everything was turning upside down, like, there were multiple articles that I wanted to write and like just wasn't going to happen, dealing with everything that was going on. So that's just a conundrum. But I also think that, for myself, I've been doing, I find that writing helps me see the world in a more intentional kind of way. And yeah, I'm working on an essay right now that's going to be published in an anthology on reproductive freedom in the fall of 2021. And it's going to be edited by Shelley Oria, who edited Indelible and Hippocampus a few years ago. And it's certainly wild to see what's going on in our country right now in the topic of reproductive freedom. My essay is going to be on the topic of my surrogacy and thinking about a woman's right to choose and decisions that we make when it comes to choosing to have a baby for somebody else. But it's a little wild to see what's going on and how that is all fitting together. So there's an intentionality for me that exists when doing this kind of work.
Yeah, it's definitely a time to focus on what what's happening in our country, because our windows to the world are news sources and networks. And so it's a lot of time taking in what's going on out there. I imagine that informs a lot. I wanted to ask a final question, which is really getting to the core of why I asked you to be here. You already answered what you're looking forward to coming back to, Purim, applause, and all that. Do you think that your community is going to come back together in the same way? You know, when we get to that point in the trickle where we can all be back together, what are you most looking forward to, and what are you worried will be hard to reform in a coming back together?
It's a great question. And it's funny when you said your community, I'm trying to figure out who is my community. You know, there are so many different communities. I know that there are certain communities of mine that I am desperate to get back to. You know, my friends from Eisner Camp and I would get together in a bar once a year in New York, you know, like something like that. I am dying to do that and get together with that community that I've known since I was 8 years old. You know, my community at Mayyim Hayyim, the staff and the volunteer mikveh guides and our board members and our volunteers. I mean, there have been times where I've been on Zoom with people all at once, and like we see each other's faces, and it's like, oh, you're still out there. You're still a real person. And I'm really looking forward to getting back to that. And it's interesting actually, because both of these communities that I'm mentioning are diffuse kinds of communities. They're people who come together and then they go their own ways, and they are not the synagogue community where I think there's an assumption that it's like the same group of people all the time because this is who we are. That's, I don't know, I guess it was, it's been a long time since we've felt that kind of communal home anyway. I am certainly looking forward to Rosh Hashanah 2021 at Washington Square Minyan. I will be there if COVID doesn't exist anymore. And even though I don't know most of the people there anymore, there are some, and we have friends who all converge there together for the experience. It's really tremendous. It's like nothing else. But it's almost like it doesn't matter that we don't know so many people there anymore, because it is, it feels like it's my community, even though I don't know who these people are. And I think that's why it speaks to us so much. It's just an incredible experience of, being spirited and singing and people who really want to be there and who are intelligent and thoughtful and are intentional about what they're doing. And those are the kinds of people that I'm jazzed by. Even if I don't know who you are and what your story is, like if you're there that day, we probably have that in common. And so therefore I like you. So I'm looking to get back to that.
I'm really deeply moved. And I think it's a wonderful note for us to wrap on, that the idea that we could, the idea that we could create communities that are so authentic to themselves and so values driven and consistent in what they deliver spiritually, that it's okay if there are different faces in the room when we come back, COVID or no COVID. I think that's a wonderful insight, that there are places that are home to you, not just because of the people. And I think that is a really sweet way to think about community building as well, because I would never want a spiritual community to be afraid that welcoming more people into their fold would change them so deeply that we would be afraid to be welcoming, right? To want to be the kind of independent minyan where it's so insular that you'd rather, shrink to nothing be on a lifeboat with your friends, right? Than to have created such a dynamic and authentic space that whoever is there, they must they must be your kind of people. And I'm really moved by that insight, Carrie. And I want to say thank you for opening up professionally and personally, and for talking about what it's going to be like when someday we come back. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Are You Coming Back? Do you have someone you'd like to recommend for a conversation like this one? Someone who might have a fascinating personal perspective on returning to Jewish rhythms beyond the pandemic? Reach out to us at hchorny@tbala.org.